What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Entrepreneurs Podcast. I'm super excited to have you here today because I have another awesome guest for you, another entrepreneur, Damien Foord. Thank you so much for taking the time today, man, to hang out with us. I'm going to go ahead and skip the bio because I want the people to hear about you from you in your own words. So thanks for being with us, man. Thanks for being on the
Yeah,
show.
no, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Having
Absolutely.
me give you my bio in my own words is a dangerous thing. I might talk for like 3 hours.
I know. It's all good though, but we're gonna do it anyway. So, actually, when I was getting ready for this interview, I was doing a little bit of research on you, and I got to ask you about this story, man. I heard that you were painting murals in Iraq while in the Air Force.
Yeah,
How does that even happen as a thing? You got to explain that.
yeah. So it's a crazy story actually, and that's funny. It's like nobody's brought that up before. So, I was in Iraq. I was in the Air Force, and for kind of speed of the thing. I was a cop in the Air Force, and cops in the Air Force fill what's called ILO missions. So we will backfill an Army slot that they don't have enough bodies to fill. And so I did 2 deployments to Iraq with an Army unit and filling an Army slot. And while we were actually in training, they wanted a mural painted for our unit, and I didn't want them to know I knew how to do it because I knew if in the military, if they find out you're good at anything, then you're doing that, and it's always in addition to all the stuff you already have to do. So I let somebody else do it, and to be honest with you, it was just terrible. And I was like, oh man, like we can't have that going on. So um, I ended up letting them know that I'm happy to paint this mural, and I ended up in total between the 2 deployments, somewhere around Iraq. There's 15 different murals that I've painted, and it ended up being a huge stress relief. So we'd be going out on missions during the day, and then at night I'd be packing up all my paint and everything and carting it over to wherever the mural was at, and painting through the night. Cup of coffee and AirPod or headphones in my ears.
That's
Um,
crazy, man. I
yeah,
mean, well, first off, I got to say thank you for your service. Both
yeah.
both my parents were in the military, and
Mhm.
my grandparents served in foreign wars. So I know the sacrifice required to do that. So I do appreciate that. But that's just such a crazy thing to think that while you're over there, you're getting to be creative in that kind of a way. So that was neat that you
Oh
were able
yeah,
to sort of
no,
link
it kept me
that.
sane. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And it's cool to feel like you left your mark, and it led to a whole bunch of stories. So my life is one where I used to have this mantra that's like live every day with a story to tell. And so if you are given 2 options, go with the one that leaves you with a better story, right?
That's
And
awesome.
so I could have gone back to my tent or whatever and slept, or I could go paint a mural, and it leaves more opportunities for stories. Let me tell you, getting paints in Iraq and brushes and paint thinner, like none of that's easy, right? So we had to like bribe Iraqis to bring us paint, and they're bringing us like industrial house paint, which isn't like ideal for painting a mural. We couldn't get paint thinner for a number of reasons, so we were thinning the paints with JP8 jet fuel.
Oh wow.
Uh, like yeah, so I mean, and JP8 jet fuel is so caustic that it would like anything we would put it in, it would like melt plastic cups and stuff like that. So it just like it altogether, it brings so much more fun to me, so much better story to tell, so many more experiences than just going back to my room and going to sleep or something.
Yeah, no doubt. I love that. That's actually a great mantra. Live your life so that you have better stories to tell. That's awesome. Well, speaking about stories, man, let's go ahead and jump into your story. I mean, if you were in the Air Force, obviously you were on a path. I'm sure you had a certain kind of mindset with something you were trying to do. How did all of this lead into entrepreneurship for you?
Yeah, so it's interesting actually. Failing at entrepreneurship led to the Air Force as opposed to the other way around. So I've got a bunch of older siblings. I'm the youngest of 8, and my brothers are 9, 10, and 11 years older than me. And so it was like I really looked up to them because there's a big age gap. And so we grew up in Silicon Valley, and right at the height of the dot-com boom in the early 2000s, they were right in their early 20s, so they were just right in the thick of it. And so I saw, I got introduced. My brother was kind of early employee at TiVo and just totally involved, and all of their friends were kind of involved in startups. And so at 13, I was this kid, and everybody's talking about startups, and I had a bootleg copy of Photoshop. And so all these people involved in startups that were around in my life were recognized like, man, this kid can get our design work done for, pennies, what someone else can do. And so I just had a lot of opportunity, built a decent portfolio really quickly. That got me into an agency by 16, by the time I was old enough to work, and lived agency life for a brief moment and realized agency life is terrible. But was able to get higher name clients through the agency, build my portfolio a lot better in a short amount of time, and then took that book of business out on my own. So I was freelancing by 17, and then had these aspirations to start this clothing line and all this stuff, right? I mean, it's funny how like a clothing brand is a lot of people's first entry
Exactly.
into entrepreneurship, and it's probably one of the worst place to start. But you learn a lot. So I did that. We made some decent money fairly fast, and then fizzled out. And it turns out, running a business is more than making a catchy gimmick and getting it out there. The short version of that story is I was 19 years old and had no idea how to manage business finances at all. And so that collapsed. And so between my freelancing stuff and the clothing line, and I dropped out of high school to totally focus on being an entrepreneur. And so when the clothing line collapsed, ironically, still had the freelance stuff, right? But I felt like such a failure, and I felt like it was so public, like somehow the whole world knows about this, and I will never work again, right? And so then I'm like, I'm thinking I'm never going to be able to get work in that field again. And so then I'm like trying to get a job. But then I realized like I'm a 19-year-old high school dropout with like no experience. And so, I'm applying at places like Jiffy Lube and Home Depot and not getting callbacks. So this is like 2005, I think. In the summer, I applied to something like 300 jobs and didn't get a callback, and was like just terrified, and just jumped, walked in. A lot of my friends joined the military and stuff like that. So one of my buddies my best friend had joined the Marines, and I saw his life was moving forward, and I felt like, really short-sighted vision, right? I felt like I was just languishing. And I talked to him and was like, man, I'm going to join the Marines. He said, I love the Marines. I love being a Marine, but join the Air Force. So the next day I went in and signed on the dotted line and left. And that was it.
Wow. That's crazy.
Into being in the Air Force, though, like any good entrepreneur, like, of course, clients are calling me back, like, where did you go? Like, we need work done. They didn't care. They didn't even know about what happened, right?
Right.
And like any good entrepreneur, I didn't know how to say no. And so I just kept taking work. So I was always running this design business on the side while I was in the Air Force. Didn't really have time. And so that ended up with me outsourcing a lot of it. There was no like freelancing sites and no gig economy back then. This is like 2006. And so all of this was done on like design driven message boards.
That's awesome, man. I mean, I can't even, I remember that time, right? I remember that time period, like you said, 2000 to 2005, when, the internet's bursting, and I'm just blown away that you as a young kid were able to see all of that opportunity and take advantage of it. That's really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, right? But I knew school didn't work for me. Now it's great to have Gary Vee out there, and hopefully a whole new generation of kids are being able to understand that, like, school doesn't work for everybody. Like, if you're an entrepreneur, just go for it and go all in. But back then it was like school was the only option, and I was like some kind of broken idiot, right? So it was like it didn't come from me recognizing opportunity. It came from like absolutely being terrified that if I don't create business for myself, I'm going to be homeless. I'm going to be some, loser or something. I don't know.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, you're right though, and I agree, man. I'm a big fan of Gary Vee and the the message that he's spreading out there, which I think, like you say, if that would have been around when we were kids and we were getting started, it would have changed our whole perspective on what we're capable of, and what we could do in the
100%.
world and how we could be valuable. Because for me, I'm the same kind of way. School was not my thing. Like, now I went through and I got pretty good grades, but like I was, I guess for lack of a better word, I was just checked out. Like, it was easy for me, like the material. So that's kind of why my grades were okay. But like I was always getting in trouble. I was never
Mhm.
paying attention. I was always the class clown. Like, I couldn't sit still for, 5 minutes. And I mean, I think I struggled through and finally got through, but like I dropped out of college because I just couldn't handle it. I was like,
Yeah.
this is not for me, and again, like you say, we're following this traditional path that society tells us, this is what we need to be doing. But there's no one size fits all when it comes to life and education, and especially with business. So I think, in a way, it seems like your pieces kind of fell in place the way that they were supposed to get you here where you are today. So that's an awesome story, man. If you don't mind, like, I mean, you started at a really young age, and obviously, you shared some of that struggle with us, but like, what were like some of the ahas and I guess failures that led to an aha that really kept you in it? Because you said you kind of went to looking for work, even though you weren't getting called back. Like, I mean, that was an option for you. Did that option go away at some point and you realize, you know what, I just have to be an entrepreneur, I have to run my own business? Like,
So
what was
that moment was probably in the Air Force, right? So I did similar to the way I did in school in the Air Force. I super excelled, right? So the way I was in high school is I had like the highest test grades in class really consistently, and then I had like a 1.7 GPA, and that was like, I think the highest year. My senior year I had like a point 0.4 or junior year I had a point 0.4 GPA. So it was just like really, really did not fit for me, right? So the Air Force was similar. I kept getting these awards. I was doing really well. I was getting promoted. I was getting put in good situations, but it didn't work for me. And so I realized, like, man, and that's part of the reason why I joined the military is I knew I was going to quit any job that I got. So I literally went so that I would have a job I could not quit. And then even then, toward the end of my 6-year enlistment, it was like I was scraping to the finish line. I should have been in a lot of trouble, and the only way I could justify the fact that I was doing stuff that would get you in a lot of trouble. I think the only reason why I wasn't in trouble was like they knew like taking any kind of disciplinary action would actually just delay me getting out.
right?
They were just like, just let him leave, get this guy
Get this
out of
thing
here.
out of here.
So it's like after that I knew this is not going to work. There's only one path for me, and I'm going to have to figure out how to do this on my own. At first, like that felt like a death sentence to me. I was not excited to be an entrepreneur in any kind of way. I think in a lot of ways I still wish my brain was wired in some way where I could just get up and go to work every day and collect my check and take the boat out on the weekends and not worry about it. But my brain just doesn't work that way. Eventually I realized, like, with a lot less judgment around it, that it has very, very little to do with like me being broken or something like that, which I like judged myself for a long time. Has a lot more just to do with work style, right? If I do get a job, the first 3 months, I'm like king of the world. They feel like they're so lucky to have me there. The next 3 months are like pretty solid, right? And then after 6 months, like the value that they're getting out of me goes down steeply, right? And I provide way more value than someone else over that tenure, though, right? And so what I realized is like that's really like ideal for a consultant, right? I need to just come on, solve real specific problems, and then leave. And then when I stack them up that way, all of a sudden you have this really successful career. It's just like that quote, everyone's a genius, but if you judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, then it'll grow up thinking it's an idiot or something like that.
Right.
Literally when I saw that on Facebook one day or something, I swear it changed my life. I was like, you know what? Fuck this. This whole time I've been like feeling like there's something wrong with me, and it's just this isn't the way I'm meant to do things. And there's tons of consultants out there doing the work. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I had this idea in my head that I was supposed to get up and go work in a cubicle, and that's what it meant to be like normal and successful.
I love that, man. That's you're totally right. Like you were the fish trying to climb the tree, and so of course it's just not working, right? But when you realize that and you stop judging yourself and being so hard on yourself, then you can actually find some space to, to develop that skill and to realize your value, and that's awesome. You were able to figure that out, that, you go into a place, you'd be super valuable in the beginning, have all kinds of ideas, create, solutions to the problems. But then it's kind of the same with me. I'm thinking about it, as you get comfortable and things just kind of stay the same, that's when our, interest just goes out the window, right? It's
Totally.
like once things become just repetitive and it's like, okay, just stick to this path. I don't want odd ideas. I don't want craziness. I just want you to do this job. That's when I'm like, all right, I'm done. Like I know personally I'm a terrible employee. So I imagine you probably feel that way too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm a systems thinker, right? So when you plug me into a system that already exists and you just want me to crank a wheel, I'm the biggest pain in the ass in the world, because all I'm doing is telling you about how your system is wrong, right?
Right.
And that's not helpful to anybody, because what you don't need a systems thinker, you need somebody to crank the wheel, right? When I recognize like, no, what I'm good at is I'll come in and set up that system. And really, even before that, do some analysis and some research to figure out what that system should even be, and then implement that, and then you bring somebody else in to run it.
Right.
And that's really where my sweet spot is.
That's awesome, man. Well, let's go ahead and shift gears a little bit. I want to talk to you sort of about your thoughts on like this digital world that we live in now, where, we're past that infancy of the internet and the whole .com boom, and we're getting into like this social media revolution, if you will. Digital marketing is taking over, the internet, and it's changing the way we do business. Like, what are your thoughts on the whole scene today, where we're at, and what are some opportunities out there that people could look at if they're thinking about, starting their own entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, I love that question. Thanks for asking it. This to me is like one of the most important subjects to talk about, and it's one of the conversations that I love having more than any other. And part of that is there's kind of a divergence in the way people are thinking about it. Some people think of it like things are becoming less and less human. Even you look at kind of the intention of Facebook was to make us more connected, and really it made us way more separate, and not just separate, but really into our own little bubbles.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually don't think that that's the way the future is going to continue to go. And certainly that's not where the opportunity lies. So people really focus on the technology that's coming. And my view of it is the technology's coming, right? So you got nanotechnology, quantum computing, obviously robotics, digital manufacturing, virtual and augmented reality, all these different things pushing the Internet of Things, everything being connected. Most of that really starts to like come onto the stage with kind of the new wave IPv6, right? New internet protocol, and 5G kind of increasing our bandwidth with data anywhere, so now you're talking about the high level of connectivity and access that you have with your devices, being able to have that almost seamless everywhere. So once you have that, it really just kicks open the door on technology. There's a lot of cool stuff that's happening there. I was really lucky to work at Singularity University for a long time, and through that got exposure to some of, got to work side by side with some of the world's experts in some of those areas that I just named. And my biggest takeaway from that experience was like, it's all just going to happen. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be worried about, I don't want to obsess over the iPhone coming. I want to think about the App Store, right? And I think like the next wave of, with all the technology that's coming, the platform that is exposed is actually us as people, right? So the more everything is automated, right, the fastest things to be automated are going to be the most technical tasks. And the more technical, the more the technical things are taken away from us, the thing that we can't automate yet and won't for a while, are actually the most human things. And so all of us actually end up becoming more human, in that, the things that we're focused on are creative problem solving, interpersonal skills, leadership, team building, and team dynamics. So if you look at the World Economic Forum, put out something probably like 5 years ago now that said like the top 10 skills needed for the next phase of society, and it's all soft skills, it's all people skills. So I actually think that that's like the vanguard of this whole new push, kind of like on the level of the way electricity has transformed our world, in that it's given us lighting, sure, and powers devices, but it's also like, the computer isn't possible without electricity, the phone isn't possible without electricity. I think like the next phase of something that huge is really getting into like the human component. And so Mark Cuban in 2017 at South by Southwest said, in 5 years, he thinks a philosophy degree is going to be more valuable than a computer science degree.
Oh, wow.
And that's sounded at the time like a crazy thing to say, and people wrote all these articles about how it was ridiculous. And I immediately was like, absolutely, because philosophy is just the understanding of people. Right. And so the better you want to be like, one of the people who was really read up in computer science 10 years ago, I think that's going to be the people that really understand people 10 years from now. And you can even see that trend, evidence of it in that stuff like Tony Robbins and self-help. They've all been growing exponentially in the last 5 years. And so Tony Robbins has a great quote out there that said, he's always, been successful at what he's been doing. He's been successful at it for a long time, but in the last 5 years, he's never seen anything like it. Right. And so to me, all of this is just evidence that there's like this revolution in, I think the next big wave isn't even going to be the technology, but the way the technology forces us to look more at ourselves.
Yeah, I really like that, man. And it's a great insight into, self-development as well, because so many people are out there like searching for a way to be valuable, like I just, I want to feel validated, I want to feel like I'm worth something. And they're kind of looking at all of these skill sets, right? Technology-based skill sets that they could go then and, sell as a service or whatever, but they're neglecting the foundation of what makes someone actually valuable. And that's the communication aspect, right? Being able to communicate with other humans and solve problems based on what that person's telling you, and like you say, technology's coming, like there's no stopping it, right? So yeah. Sitting here and trying to, stress out over which one I want to be on, whether it's virtual reality or, audio marketing with like all of the, echo dots and, this Internet of Things, as you mentioned, everything communicating, like that's not so important as to how can you impact somebody, human to human, right? How can you solve a problem? And that's really where people should be focusing on. So I love that insight, man. It makes a lot of sense. And, you know, you sound like you are very much on the forefront of technology and sort of where we're going. So like, I mean, you know, without saying, oh, focus on Facebook or Instagram, you know, what is the thing that someone should focus on though? Like, you know, when they're coming, I've got a job that I have to go to, and I know I want to create a side hustle, or I want to create something that can allow me to start a new direction, you know, for my work or whatever. Um, like what can they focus on in terms of starting that side hustle? And I don't necessarily need like a business opportunity, but you know, in your thoughts, what's the most
You know,
important?
I think one of the ways that I was super lucky in my life is that my dad over and over just kept saying, you know, no matter what you do what you love. Right. And it's such a trite thing, but my dad is like, he doesn't talk a lot. And you know, so when he does talk, it's powerful. And I could feel like, man, he was so serious about that. And then my dad's a database engineer. And so, and when he started in computers, like everybody thought it was crazy, and he was like a machinist, and it was like a union job, so he should just keep it. Of course, he makes way more money as a database engineer now than he ever would have as a machinist, right?
Mm,
And so for him, he just knew, like, nah, it's not what I want to do. And he took that leap, and he had 8 kids and had to go to night school to learn computers, and did that, you know, in the 80s. So it was a giant leap of faith. And so I know how serious it is for him, that like just follow what it is that feels right to you. And my dad tried to force me to be an engineer over and over and over, and I was never into it, you know. And so, but design, I had this really, really natural inclination towards. And I always knew I didn't. I had friends who were like way more successful freelance designers than me, and I knew like that just wasn't my path. And of course, design thinking wasn't a thing yet at the time either, or at least hadn't hit the world stage. But I kept applying design more in this like really broad sense, right? As a way of thinking. And so, you know, I didn't know what that was, and I didn't know what that meant, and I certainly didn't know how to make money off it, but I just kept going in that direction. So I knew visual design paid the bills for a while. It allowed me access to do this thing that I really wanted to do, which was more like design strategy. And now design strategy has grown into this like broader business strategy, and we're applying cognitive science. And when you dig down deep into what makes good design work, it's really just an understanding of people. And if you want to put scientific rigor behind that, then you start digging into cognitive science, right? So we're applying cognitive science to business strategy, and able to do that with a lot of success. And people look at it now and it's like, man, that's, you know, brilliant. And it's like, well, it's an evolution from just following what felt good, right? And then finding a way that I can make money in that. And then really, I tell people, like, if you have any piece of you that's still like, maybe I want to keep a job, like just keep it, because, you know, for me, in my experience, it's just such a brutal journey. It'll toss you around so much that you got to be ready. If I could have quit, I would have 100 times. I'd probably, if I felt like I could, I'd quit right now, you know.
so
Uh, but I
this
think
may
this is
have
my best opportunity, you know.
right, and this may have an obvious answer, but I got to
Yeah.
ask, in your opinion, like what are the qualities required to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, you know, other people have said it, and I kind of, it's the thing I resonate the most with, that you've got to like be sick somehow, right? Like I forget, I think it's David Rose is like this famous entrepreneur, and he calls it the disease of entrepreneurism, right? Like man, I felt that way my whole life. Like I'm just infected with this thing, and I go work a job, and I'm like, it's not like I wish I was running my own thing. It's like, no, I'm ruining my job because I can't stop.
Right.
And so, you know, I think that is probably, for, you know, again, for me, if I could stop, I would have. So I think having this like compulsion that you can't say no to is a big component of it, in my opinion. But other than that, I think the most important thing is being really, really comfortable in uncertainty.
Right.
and test that, right? So people love, if you ask anybody on the street, like, how comfortable are you in uncertainty? People want to believe that they are, right? But it's like, I could sell everything I own today and start a new life in Thailand tomorrow, or name anywhere. And like, I would be uncomfortable. It's not like I would just love that, right? I would hate it, but I would do it. Because I'm comfortable in being uncomfortable.
Right.
And I can't hold a job. I can't keep a marriage. I can't stay in the military. All these things. I rarely stay in the same house for very long. All of these things are things that are like, make certain aspects of my life much more difficult, but it makes me really, really flexible and adaptive in business.
That's awesome, man. I mean, you're absolutely right that you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And one of the things I always like to say is that your best life is literally right on the other side of an uncomfortable decision.
Totally.
You have to be able to make these hard choices, because that's what opens the doors to opportunity, and if you keep doing things that are comfortable and, that you know what the result's going to be, you're never really going to change your sphere, your world.
And even when it sucks, you're learning, and so like the most valuable skill that somebody can have is to be in the part of it that sucks the worst and be able to take a step back and look at it and say, okay, like, but what am I learning right now?
Right.
And my journey has not been great. I've lost a lot of money throughout the way too. And I've made big bets and they didn't work out. And, but at the end of the day, you have to be able, I had a mentor who told me, your emotions are just boats going down a stream, and you could be hopping from boat to boat and get exhausted, or you could just sit on the banks and watch them go by. And that's been really, really valuable for me. That, when I was at one point, I was like running a company that was like doing really well and it was getting a lot of attention. But I was like living in a garage and my car got repoed, and like, I was like, how am I supposed to show up to this news interview? Like literally. And like, I'm barely keeping it together. So it's like that stuff all happens, and you got to be able to take a step back and just not get sucked into, oh, this means I'm a failure. This means I'm a piece of shit. I knew I was never going to be able to do it, because that voice will eat you alive if you listen to it.
Yeah, that's a great analogy too, man. That, the one where it's like your emotions are boats, and like you say, you could sit there and jump from one to the other all day long, but where does that leave you? Like it just leaves you tired, hopeless, feeling like shit. You haven't gotten anything done, or you can change your perspective, right? Step back a little bit, sit on the shore and allow them to go by for what they are, and understand that you still have, this shore, that your foundation that you're building, right? And these boats will come and they will pass. They don't have to take over your life.
And everybody goes through it. It's like Steve Jobs did it. Gary Vee does it. Like everybody has these days where they're totally screwing it up and they feel like they don't know what to do. And probably what separates the people from, who make it from those who don't is how much can you just accept yourself in that moment, instead of beat the shit out of yourself for it. Because the thing is, if you beat the shit out of yourself for it, do you think you're going to want to get back on the horse?
No, of course
not. Why not? No, you quit.
Yeah.
And so the thing is at some point you got to just accept it as part of the journey and not, use it as quit or use it as evidence why you're an idiot. And you just got to say, oh, yep, here's going into the valley again. And what am I going to learn from it and come out on the other side?
Yeah. And like you said, man, every failure or trip up is just a lesson to learn from, and all we're doing is learning. So if anything, if you can reevaluate the way that you look at those failures and shortcomings as learning opportunities, then you almost start to look forward to them. Like I personally now in my life, I try to fail as fast as I can. Not that I'm trying to fail, but I'm trying to get stuff done so quickly that I can learn from it if it doesn't work and change path and test something else, So
yeah. And I record them, right? So I have a failure like diary.
Oh,
and
nice.
And so as soon as I feel the like crushing weight of like, I can't do this and I'm fucking up and whatever, then I start writing, right? Like, what am I learning? And what am I missing? What am I missing that's causing this situation? And how am I learning to overcome that? And so then I've got this journal that like documents these awesome insights that come from, that phase, right? And so like when you're writing high and, you're cashing checks and all of that, it's fun, but I never journal about that because
Right.
it's like, that's all about the experience. You know what I mean? You don't learn a lot from cashing checks. You know what I mean? You learn a lot from when you don't got any to cash and people are got to
That's
be
a
writing
great,
stuff.
yeah, that's a great tip. Take a journal and start actually recording those moments in time when you fail, and then record the lessons that you learn along the way, how you feel about it. Like that's man, that insight. I wish I would be doing that, and I'll start doing it now because, yeah, looking forward or moving forward, looking back on that time, there's so much to learn from those moments, and so easily we forget. I mean, it's hard for me to remember what I did 2 days ago, so
Totally.
it's important to write that stuff down. Well, listen, let's go ahead and shift one more time, man. I want to ask you about, work-life balance, because as you mentioned, it's crazy. As an entrepreneur, your head is in a million different places. You're trying to do all kinds of different things. So do you ever feel the overwhelm, and how do you balance it in your life?
Yeah. So that is tough. I think I definitely feel the overwhelm. I try to design my life in a way that it's got room, right? Where I give myself buffer because I know that if I'm there's two key things to that, right? Generally, when I feel overwhelmed, it means I look at that as like a light on my dashboard that means like time to collaborate, right? So if I'm feeling overwhelmed, that means there's probably something going on, likely in my ego, that I'm like, oh no, I have all this stuff and I can't ask for help because it looks like I don't know what I'm doing or something like that. When in reality, like, no, the sense of overwhelm is me calling bullshit on myself and saying, like, go ask for help, right? So the first thing I do is I'll set up a whiteboard session with some of my friends or something and just talk through the problem and get some other input. And usually then that like sparks some creativity. The other thing sometimes I'm just going so hard, right? So sometimes what we think is overwhelm is actually burnout.
Mm,
Burnout's something totally different, right? Like sometimes you just need to rest, and you need to give yourself the space. And I do, like, I'll give myself the space to like curl up in a blanket and watch Netflix all day sometimes. And people are like, oh, how much Netflix do you watch? Like zero, because that's just sucking your life away, which it can, you know what I mean? But I'm also a fucking human, you know what I
right.
mean? So like, if I need a down day, I just give myself a down day. And if I need a lot of down days, then I need to start to stop and think about what's going on, right? And probably like I'm not doing what I should be doing. We took on not that long ago. So I work with a few other people. They work for me or with me, and we took on this contract that like it sounded really sexy, and so we took it on. But really, like the actual execution of it was just not what we want to be doing, right? And so after a while into the contract, I'm like, I'm needing lots of personal days. It's taking way longer than it should. And like I give myself a down day and I still don't feel good after that. And it's like, whoa, something's wrong, you
Yeah,
know? And instead of judging myself or like feeling like, that's embarrassing or something, I just recognize like, no, I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing then.
right.
And so we did what we could to like outsource what we can, muscle through what we had to, and then like just get out of it and recognize like, man, we're not going to do that again,
Exactly.
because it's just not, if it's what I wanted to be doing, it would come a lot easier than that.
Right.
Especially when you're living your life like I am. I don't have the stability of working at some stable job, and so there's no reason to deal with the stuff that you don't want to be doing. If I'm gonna be doing stuff I don't want to do, I might as well at least go do it at a job and get some stability, right?
Absolutely.
Uh, and I do see a lot of entrepreneurs do that, right? They go be an entrepreneur so that they can do more of what they want to do, but then they end up making all these compromises where they end up just having like basically a really unstable job. And that's not what you want to do. Then it's not worth it, you know?
That's awesome. That's good advice, man. Um, well, Damien, I got to ask, what do you do for fun, man? Like what do you do outside of work? What sparks joy in your life?
Yeah, this is always the toughest question for me, because I love what I do so much that honestly, I work a lot. And then when I'm not working, I'm usually like some friends will come over or something, and I'm talking through stuff that's adjacent to work that I'm doing.
Yeah, you
Uh,
sound like me. You just can't get off it.
right? Yeah. I love travel. Right. So the military had me, um, in all kinds of. I was 24 different countries, and so that's something that I've continued with. My girlfriend lives in Mexico, and so I'm in Mexico once a month, going back and forth. Um, and I guess when I'm not working, it's finding new stories, creating new stories to tell, do something. We'll get out and it's never like, oh, let's just go hang out on the beach. It's like, let's go to that beach that had, the like crocodiles were there last week or whatever, right? Like go find something interesting to do because um I've been in this situation in my life where, some people go their whole lives and are hardly ever exposed to death. And I've had, multiple people before I joined the military. I had some close friends who died, and then I lost friends while in the military. And so it's just really, really clear for me,
Right.
like this is ending. You know what I mean? We've all got a really fucking short time here, and mine might be up a lot sooner than I think. I could get hit by a bus tomorrow, so you better make sure today was worth it. You know?
That's awesome. That's awesome. And again, that idea to live your life in a way where, it gives you an awesome story to tell, that it's just such a good, it's just a good mindset. It's a good way to look at everything you encounter in life. How can you make this interesting, right? How can we do something that's a little bit outside of the box so that we have an awesome story to tell? Damien, this has been a really fun time, man. I appreciate having you on the show and all the insight that you shared with us. Go ahead and tell the people how they can get in touch with you and how they can, find you online if they need your help. What can you help them with? All that good stuff.
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can search for me there, Damien Foord with two O's. And I'm super active and I'm super approachable. And that's probably the best way to get in touch with me.
On LinkedIn.
I love people and I love, getting in contact. So
Awesome, man. Well, I'll definitely link up your LinkedIn on the show notes. And then if there's any other websites or anything you want to hand me, I'll get those on the show notes too. Again, Damien, thank you so much for being on the show today. It's been a blast chatting with you, and we'll catch you on the next one.
awesome. Thanks, man.